Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, I had to do it to him. Today we're going to read The Absence of Books. Now open your third eyes. Yeah, you know what I mean. This book was a recent acquisition from a free pile. I couldn't believe it, even though it's got a slightly ripped dust jacket. That's probably why it was given away. It's not a symbol of your wealth if it's got a slight tear in it. But I knew the moment I saw that cover, I yelled to my daughter who was with me, "That's a Solowit piece." I read this wonderful book about Solowit and Eva Hesse called Irrational Judgments. It kind of changed my life. Had me pretentiously calling myself an artist instead of a writer. It's great. Check out Irrational Judgments if you get a chance. It's about the conceptual art scene in New York in the 1960s, specifically around the careers of Eva Hesse and Solowit. And Solowit, as you can see here, was like, a lot of his art was like the ideas and the measurements and so on behind him. And, you know, he was kind of Bauhaus adjacent, and the idea that you could make things that were basically like crafts that were engineered and could still be considered art. Because as Duchamp proved years earlier, like just calling something art is enough to make it worth studying as art, because it has to do with the new perceptions that evokes. But this book was like made for me. I was so excited to see this. And it's got lots of cool art, great full color visuals. Yeah, when looking at rich people's book collections, they have a lot more coffee table books and expensive books and stuff. Pretty cool when a free box yields up some of those treasures sometimes. Spiral Jetty, that's in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. Here it's not in great shape anymore. I read a weirdly negative essay about it. What do you call this art? Go on. This reminds me of when I was staying in these towns in Alabama. On that walk across the country, there were these folk art towns, Seal and Pittsview, Alabama. That whole area got into folk art when a man was plowing out in his field and he found a turnip with what looked like a human face on it. And he put it in the general store window and it sold to some rich passing through tourist for $50. And so he's like, well, I'm going to do that again. And he just kept painting folk art motifs and things he wanted to paint, and became a known artist. And so did the whole town. That's where Butch Anthony, the folk artist, is from, and that's who we stayed with when we were there. And that museum in Pittsview is amazing. And folk art is just art. It's so great and pure and awesome. Not that this is folk art, but it evoked that for me. I'm getting some folk art vibes here and there. This feels Cornellian to me, like Joseph Cornell's shadow boxes. Maybe it is one. It's Armand, not an artist I know, but I bet he's Cornell influenced. You got Rauschenberg, who's such a great mind. There's a very good documentary about him on YouTube I highly recommend. I was really into Rauschenberg for a moment. He did a series of white canvases, kind of like Cage's 4 Minutes and 33 Seconds of Silence, or Duchamp's Fountain. I think those are like important works to think about together. But Rauschenberg was really interesting, innovator, okay with his work being ephemeral. Whoa. It reminds me of the photographs of Karen Hipscher. She's a really cool artist here in Albuquerque. An old friend. Where's this Dewan Gallery anyway? Los Angeles to New York. Maybe it's like that pop song, American Boy, Take Me to New York, I Want to See LA. They're not, I didn't think they were the same place. So this looks good. This looks like it would pair well with Eric Schlosser's Command and Control. I bet Schlosser drew from this book. Organizations, Accidents, and Nuclear Weapons. Whoa. This book's in the New Mexico section. I'll have a lot to say about it then, but it's about the safety of nuclear materials sites. Limits of safety. Environmental tragedies. Whoa. It's just Chernobyl. Ugh. I had a lot of fear around Chernobyl as a kid. I made my whole kindergarten class cry talking about it, and I got sent home because I panicked everybody. Because my older siblings told me stuff I probably shouldn't have known. The atoms are going to come and they're going to kill us. They're going to kill us all. My brother being like, Mikey, everything is made of atoms. This chair is made of atoms. You don't have to be scared of atoms. But then later when I lived in Austria and went to school there, everyone had Chernobyl memories. They had to stay home for a really long time because Ukraine's right next to Austria. They all saw the flash of the fire. Oh, it's going to be one of those tragic documents. It just leaves me feeling like, history sometime. like Iris Chang's The Chinese in America or The Rape of Nanking. Just like, that's a lot of suffering in one book. It's a lot of humans and humanity to other humans. Ugh. This book intrigues me. War is Not Our Destiny. Anti-war book by Frank Sowers. An anti-war book by a former soldier. Kind of like that simple stamped look of the cover. We'll read. I really hope its title is true. I read this when I was reading every book about Korea. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. I once went in high school. When I was in high school, I went on a family trip to Vietnam with my dad, who had been a Protestant chaplain there during the war, to Ho Chi Minh City and the countryside. And then we traveled around a little bit, and we went to South Korea, and we went to the DMZ. And so I've stood right there on the border of North Korea, and it was very interesting, and definitely interested me in that place. We went bowling, and the biggest shoes they had were like half my foot size, and I was in so much pain. I was like crying while we were bowling, just tears streaming down my head. Like, not making any sounds. It's so fun. Sure love bowling. But it's fascinating. The Korean War technically never ended. It's a standoff. That's so wild. It's still going on. And South Korea is such a fascinating country because, in part, from the extreme American influence there since the Korean War, and the way Korea has taken everything and run with it, like pop and barbecue. Also alcoholism, and the only Asian country with an obesity epidemic. And whoa, sorry guys. But America has essentially treated South Korea as like another state with like 16,000 troops there at the time of this book's writing. This was good. One of the best pieces of reading advice I've ever gotten was from my bookstore owning friend, Jody Malone, back in 2000, when she said, read by theme. She's like, you really want to know something? Read a lot of books about it. Follow one book to the next book, you know? Like, if you're curious about something, read more, learn it. You'll be a scholar just from your reading. I'm like, that's so true. Now, looking back, because I found that. I've also found that there's a lot of anti-North Korean propaganda that is not really accurate. And some of those detractors with really sensational stories sometimes like get their stories completely disproven. Like, that absolutely does happen. North Korea definitely has had a dictatorial family in charge for a long time, for sure. But there's also a lot of propaganda mixed in with the presentation of that country to us. For instance, I did not like that movie that Seth Rogen did about North Korea, Dear Leader. What's it called? I don't remember. But I was excited to see it because I've been reading all these Korea books. And then I was like, wow, that's like a fantasy of empire. It was such a gross, coarse portrait of a country, you know? I don't know. That's how it struck me at the time, having just read 10 books on Korea. And I think I saw this in another section, maybe a free box haul. That's beautiful, The Age of Males. Gotta love a simple, informed, well-researched book around a theme. New research may be added, but that kind of stuff never gets old, really. Ugh, jeez, man, going through your own book collection is really an emotional ride. I have a story about this book. I'm like, have I mentioned this before? I don't think so, though. Okay, this book is Murder at 40 Below, True Crime Stories from Alaska. So, when I was 17 years old, I read Into the Wild, and it kind of changed my life. And I went from a religious kid who was like, I'm going on a mission, to a kid who dropped out of college my first year, age 17 and 18, and went up to Alaska. I also had happened to make some friends from Alaska, so I was like, I know people over there. That's amazing. I had really wanted to, ever since I'd gotten like a magazine from a dentist's office when I was 14, and with beautiful pictures, I was like, I need to go to this place. And so there are a few chapters in my book about Alaska. There's one about first going up there. There's the oral history about the depressing winter. There's one about living in a tent in the woods and traveling around in the spring. And there's one about hitchhiking from Alaska up into northern Canada and then down to the U.S. after that. So I had about a year and a half of Alaskan adventures, and all the spring of one year in like the late 90s. What year was that? Let's say 98, 97, 98, something like that. 98, 99. Sorry, I get distracted. My neighbors are like always yelling at dogs or something. So anyway, that spring I spent a lot of time hitchhiking around with a hippie girlfriend. I was like an ex-Mormon. She was an ex-Jehovah's Witness. We were a strange pair. But we had a little dog named Cassidy, named after Neil Cassidy. What a cliche. And we hitchhiked all over Alaska, pretty much every road we could. There weren't that many. It's just the bottom corner of the state had roads at the time, really. And we never could get onto the private trucking road that went up to Prudhoe Bay, or the secret back roads we heard about down to Juneau. I don't think they exist. Maybe now they do. There's a trucking road out to Barrow, too. Anyway. We hitchhiked all over a huge area of Alaska, or it felt huge to us. Pretty much as far north as the roads would go, and all over. My hitchhiking sign often said north. But, people are always like, hitchhikers are so scary, but much scarier than hitchhikers. Hitchhikers can murder people, of course. In the book In Cold Blood, the killers are talking about we should just kill somebody and take their car. And they're all ready to, and almost do, I think. But it's way scarier to get into somebody else's car because they have control. They know if they have weapons in there. They, can lock the doors. They're driving this giant high-speed vehicle. I think it's way scarier, Usually travelers have like a bag of stuff they care about and they don't want to, anyway. I've been in a number of creepy cars, but sorry to go off on this, but this is connecting up to this book. So anyway, one time my hippie girlfriend and dog and I got picked up by this guy in like a big sedan type vehicle with like a coarse paint job. And he was super friendly. And he said, everywhere I go, Jerry rides with me. He had a picture of Jerry Garcia taped to his dashboard, and he seemed super friendly. But we had been hitchhiking around so much, and you hitchhike a lot when you're hitchhiking in Alaska because it's just light all the time in the summer. So it's like 20 hours a day sometimes. You never know where you'll end up, but you really develop an instinct. And the moment I got into this car with this guy, I'm like, this guy's going to kill me. I was like super sure of it right away. I got like literally the hair all stood up on my neck. I was sitting in the back seat, in the front seat, in the passenger seat, and my GF, Tatiana, was sitting in the back seat. And I looked back at her, and she had the most wretched look of absolute abject fear on her face, and she kept darting glances over at this guy, and I knew she felt it too. We both had that crazy road radar sense that saved us a few times out in our travels. Whether psychological or what, I don't know. But so after I saw that look on her face, and even our dog was being like, he was not happy, and he was usually a content little dog, but he was like rumbling and gurring away. He was just a little puppy, so we couldn't have sicked him on him or anything. So anyway, I'm all, hey man, thanks so much for the ride. We really do appreciate it. But we were both just realizing that we're really tired, actually. We just hitchhiked so much. And I think we're going to just go camp in a meadow or something like that and try to sleep because we haven't slept in a long time. We've been pushing some long days with this constant daylight. This guy immediately got defensive and he's like, well, if I let you out, then who am I going to talk to? And he's like swearing, going off. And I'm like, I don't know, man. That's not our problem, though. We're not like your captive conversational partners or whatever. Said something like that. I'm always cracking wise. Like, nah. You said you were gonna ride with me, and you're riding with me. I need you're riding with me. And I was like, look, man. If you don't pull over right now, I'm gonna throw myself out of this car, and I may get hurt, but I am gonna cause a huge investigation. And I don't know if you want that kind of attention. I feel like you probably don't. And he immediately was like, and then he goes, fine. And he pulled over onto a gravel roadside and gave us 1.5 seconds to get all our stuff. And then he slammed the doors and took off in a spray of gravel. Okay. We were both like, that guy was a freaking serial killer. We were exclaiming and yelling at each other. We just all of our suspicions and feelings and thoughts and the details we noticed or thought we noticed. Every little thing he said. And there were a lot of just words that didn't sit right and emphases that he placed that were weird. Anyway, that guy's in this book. And this is like a true crime murder book. I swear one of these chapters is him. It's him. I read this book. It was given because people give me horrible gifts like this. They're like, you lived in Alaska. Do you want to have a panic attack thinking about your past? Read this. See also this documentary I watched about serial killers that find their victims by picking them up in Alaska. It was a whole documentary, 2 hours. Maybe it was just a TV show, but an hour-long one. But it was my world. It enveloped me. I had a cumulative attack of the heebie-jeebies. Because I hitchhiked a lot all over Alaska. And apparently it's just consequence-free up there to... Yeah, I kind of see it. If you have a Nowheresville place, there's some creeps out there. As I've said before on this channel, I once found a pit with manacles and a broken phone out in the middle of the desert. I mean, you never know. Yeah, you never know. Yeah, I feel a personal connection to this book. Maybe someday I'll write about like an essay about that, verifying it. Yeah, the guy is like a serial killer in this story, in this essay or article chapter. And there's like that, yeah, I can't remember what it was that tipped me off that it was him for sure, because it's been a long time since I read this, but that's why I have this book. Oh, when I saw this book, I was like, I have to have it. That is fascinating. The international history of the American Revolution. You know, Americans don't even think about this stuff. 99% anyway. Like, yeah, how did the rest of the world regard the American Revolution? How did they perceive it? I bet this is fascinating. I want to know. The Theft of the Spirit, a journey to spiritual healing with Native Americans. Doctor, speaker, spent nearly 20 years as a physician among Native Americans in the Southwest. Huh. Oh, that's interesting. So the guy learned some things about wholeness, maybe. A 1,000-year-old village. Wow. I once heard some quote from some writer who was like, I just can't fathom how ancient Europe is. And I'm like, literally every point of European history had something going on over here too. The development of the atlatl, that's kind of major. Multi-story homes, 4-story tall homes sometimes, much more. Living in relative harmony with one's environment, incredible. We're so, owned by the modern mindset that we can't even like imagine that as like a pinnacle of anything. What? Just living in harmony with your environment? Probably will read. Okay, let me tell you something that's really cool about this book. One, what it's about. Ishi the Last Yahi. Ishi was like the last known Native American living outside of Western culture, basically. And he walked out of the California hills and because all of his people had died. I mean, what a fascinating story. I have a couple of books about him. He just like knew nothing of modernity, but he followed railroad tracks until people were like, whoa, what era are you from? He walked out into cars and world of everything modern. Get this, see that Theodora Kroeber that co-wrote this book? That's Ursula K. Le Guin's mom. Reunited. Ishi the Last Yahi would actually be a good band name, and Discard would be a good album title. But it would only be a good band name for people that were indigenous. It would be appropriative, I think, if like white people took that name. Mrs. A. Thankful Carson. What a wild story. How has there not been a good Ishi the Last Yahi movie? Maybe there has been. The Last Days of Hitler. I love a compressed historical account. I've been to the Eagle's Nest. I lived in Austria where he died. I read a compelling thing once that made it sound like he died a few days later, actually, after the official story. Okay, what's that? Eddie Izzard died the way he lived, in a pile of petrol on fire. On fire, a pile of petrol. But because I grew up in Austria, like this, World War II is so real to me. And the Holocaust is so real to me. I like experienced all this stuff. We used to go to a concentration camp all the time, Mauthausen. And just everywhere you go, there's evidences of that insane, huge war. And oh my gosh. Kind of made me gave me a nice, quiet, serious sadness deep inside that I can always have and treasure. This is an old family book. This has been in the family for a long time. 1947. Probably another one that my dad's adopted parents owned. This is a really good book. Tall Man. But it's about a very tragic story. And it'll tell you about a world you might not know about. About, really suffering indigenous populations in the ghettos of Australia. And about this guy, and he's walking along and he's singing Who Let the Dogs Out. It's been a long time since I read this. And the cops think he's yelling insulting things at them, and they just beat him so badly that he dies in prison. And he becomes a touchstone. This is a compelling book. I kind of hate Amazon, and I don't use Amazon because it's just such a kind of an evil monolith now, you know? Because I feel like it was kind of a company that was kind of using books to like become this global mono company that is the only company. You can't see a train in the West. It's not just all Amazon logos now. It's crazy. A long time ago, when it was more of a book site, I was a top 1,000 Amazon reviewer. And I would just get sent boxes of books all the time, and I got sent this. Pretty cool. Like getting sent boxes of stuff. Tall Man, The Death of Dumaji by Chloe Hooper. This book stayed with me. One time I was reading this at a gas station while my gas was pumping, and this woman came up and said, "I just want you to know that you are just adorable." Made my day. I'm like, if you knew what this book was about, you wouldn't say this. This is a very serious book, and I was reading a sad part. Also, it really shouldn't be like cute to read. You know? Cool. 199 things every American should know. I'm not exactly patriotic. I sit through the Pledge of Allegiance 5 times a week, TBH. Though I do think about it more than the average person. Because I wonder to what degree, like, national coherence and pride are an important part of living in a place, you know? And I do think it's, like, not the worst thing in the world to be like, yeah, I'm from a place, you know? And, like, I don't know. They added, in 1952, they added Under God to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you watch the movie The Bells of St. Mary with Bing Crosby, which I would not otherwise recommend. In fact, run far away, unless you like pure schmaltz. No, I mean, that's just my impression from it. It's been a long time. There's this scene in it where they say the Pledge of Allegiance without Under God that was added during the McCarthy era. Then it's a little less objectionable because it's not like, you know, we're supposed to have freedom of religion and so on. Then I don't know. Yeah, I wish they hadn't added that, I guess. But it is a strange thing to have like a loyalty affirming ritual. I don't know. This is how humans are. What's in here, I wonder? New South, a term used after the Civil War by Southern publicists and boosters of industrial development in the region as a kind of shorthand for modernization and economic expansion. Huh. The South maybe did need some of that. They had like, you know, hookworm epidemics and stuff from not wearing shoes and things. I have a lot of Southern ancestors too, so I hope I'm not talking out of turn. Like my last name Smith comes from a Warren Smith of Tennessee, who was baptized into the Mormon church by Wilford Woodruff, the fourth Mormon prophet. And then he and his family moved west with the church, but Warren Smith was like a bad guy and was abusive to his family and cheated on his wife and all this stuff. And his wife had Brigham Young get their marriage annulled when they got to Salt Lake City. That's who gave me my name. Not one of them. I've read a few books on the Library of Alexandria. What a great topic. I have to go listen to the audiobook of this one. It's so interesting. Where would we be now as a species if we'd had the Library of Alexandria kept intact? Some people say that's overstated, but others say we'd be on the moon in a base on other planets. These people had, they knew how big the Earth was and how much it weighed. They knew everything about human anatomy, in part because of horrifying vivisections done on prisoners. Yikes. Oh, it was a different time, you know. Back then it was just fine to like cut people open while they were alive, you know. You gotta understand, it was the times. So everyone thought, you know, are they really people? They're prisoners, they're our enemies. I took an early Christianity class that was so fascinating and got me very interested in stuff like this. The Gospel of Judas. Early Christianity is wild. I mean, there's really no difference between early Christianity and a cult, you know, if you study it. And that's just fascinating to be like, how did this go to that? It's like reading about John and Paul playing guitar together after church when they're 14 and 15. Going to be the Beatles. Yeah. The Gospel of Judas tells an alternate story. Most of these Gospels were all written much after, you know, the time of Jesus by their churches, not by the apostles that bear their names. But there's so many more texts from the era. You know, every time there was a Christian council, they'd throw some works out as non-canonical. But there are a ton of interesting ones. Many alternate takes of Jesus' birth. One where he's like born in a cave and there's a midwife present. This is a good book. Lewis and Clark, The Indian Eyes. Yeah, good to read stuff like this when you study Lewis and Clark. One of the writers in here writes that he believes he's a descendant of Clark because the whole expedition was hooking up with Native women the whole time. And some of the most common treatments that Lewis and Clark had to do for their men, and it's horrifying to contemplate it, were for venereal diseases, and the treatments are horrifying. And so anyway, people don't think about the Lewis and Clark expedition in quite that way. But there's some good writers in here, and it's got Momades in here. That's cool. And it's good to hear these Native perspectives because, I mean, I think the journals of Lewis and Clark are really valuable, like American documents, because say what you will about their expedition, but they saw North America, before the rest of Europe saw it, and what it was like, and described it, and they did seem to have good intent. There was a time when they met an Indian chief who was like paralyzed, and they rubbed his arms and legs until he could move and walk again, and like gave him a long treatment. Like, what qualified you to do that? Suggest that. How interesting. But through it all, Clark owned a slave, York, which really breaks my heart, especially because Clark is such a good writer. He had like a poet's soul, it seemed like, on the page, the way he described things, In fact, I have a poem that I've written where it's just excerpts from Clark's journals, reformatted. But thinking about him being the slave owner, like, really is a wrinkle. Well, yeah, there's still several books about Lewis and Clark in the collection. Though I just gave away those comics that I had, which retold the expedition in a fictional way, like they were monster hunters. Gave them to my cable installer. I'm telling you, I'm always giving books away. I'm like Johnny Appleseed with the books. Sentinels in the Stream. Lighthouses in the St. Lawrence River. Oh. Hey, Mike, hey there. I thought you would enjoy this book. I often think of Hike for Hope 2001 with fond memories. Thank you for helping keep me going. Miss you, Ray. Oh, it's my buddy Ray. He's the one that just beat cancer. And he sent all the hikers this book that contains a picture. Ray Ford. That contains a picture of the lighthouse where our hike ended. Cape Gaspé. Oh, man. I was so mad when they extended that Eastern Continental Trail later to be longer and not end at this lighthouse. It was such a perfect ending for that trail. You took away our victory. Still, wrote that miniseries, and it was a great time. Ray, I'm so glad your surgery went well, man, and you're gonna beat this thing completely. I know it. Thank you for this book. Cool, Navajo Indian myths. I love stuff like this. Actually, maybe why is this a nonfiction? Shouldn't this be with? I have this like folk tales and myths and fairy tales of the rest of the world. Maybe it should be with that. Yeah, I think I'm putting this with these because I tend to read these things in groups and themes, I'd be like, I'm going to read a bunch of myths to organize later. And one last book, a recent free box acquisition, Lizzie Borden and the Trial of the Centuries. Can't wait. This will be fun. I mean, not fun. It's about a double axe murder. No, it's about her whole family. I don't know. Who'd she kill? Her parents? Her parents. Yeah. But I bet that'll be a good read. Probably. If it strikes the right tone, I hope it will. The only thing that gives me pause is that font. But I bet it'll be good. This has been some books. If any of you are wealthy and would like to hire me to do some mindless, pointless stuff or real work, let me know. I could be your writer for hire. Anytime you need something written. 3 a.m. You call me up. We'll be on contract. I heard Muhammad Ali had a guy following him around all the time just saying, "You're awesome. You're great." I could do that. If anyone needs somebody like that, I will follow you around and build your self-esteem nonstop. And if you want me to throw in book facts, I will. Why do we... Yeah. Anyway, remember that one. All right, take care, everybody. Have a great one.